good morning, good afternoon, and good evening, maybe, to everybody. My name is Keisha Mayuga. I'm part of TUMI and Women Mobilize Women, and we're happy to have this international launch of the Transportation Systems Just and Feminist, or Sistemas de Transporte Justos y Feministas. I tried. But yes, this is together in collaboration with Mujeres and Movimiento, Despacio, and ITDB Brazil. So thank you everybody for joining us this morning. We're happy to share this tool that's usable for cities, administrators, and operators side. So it's a very practical tool that's available both in Spanish and in English. So later we will dive into what the tool looks like. And I'm very excited to also to hear about the examples that were given here and that could be seen mostly in Latin America. And actually, without further ado, I will give the microphone to Dani Chacón. So Dani, please take it away.
Thank you, Keisha. Muchas gracias. Muy buenos días con
Thank
todas.
you so much,
Muchas
Keisha. Good
gracias por
morning,
conectarse.
all.
Mi
Thank
nombre
you
es
so much
Daniela
for
Chacón.
joining. My
Yo
name
soy
is
una de
Daniela
las
Chacón,
fundadoras de
and
Mujeres y
I am
Movimiento,
one of the
y
founders
parte
of
del
a
equipo
movement in
que ha
Women in
trabajado en
Movement and part of
desarrollar
the
esta
team that's
herramienta.
worked in the
Let me
development of
translate
this
it in
tool.
English.
If you're
If you are
listening
to
to
listen to
me
me in
in
English or
Spanish
Portuguese, no se
and you want
olviden
to
que
listen to
pueden
me in English or
usar la
Portuguese, do not
herramienta de
forget that you can
interpretación.
use the interpretation
Pueden escucharnos
tool and
en
you
el idioma
can
de su
listen to
preferencia.
us in the language of
El
your
resto
preference.
de ponentes
And
del día
the
de hoy
other
vamos a hablar en
speakers,
español.
today we will all be speaking
Entonces nos
in
pueden escuchar
Spanish.
en inglés o en portugués. You
So
can
you can
listen to us
listen
in
to
English
us
or
in
Portuguese
English or
using the
Portuguese.
interpretation glove at the bottom of your panel in the Zoom. Contarles que, bueno, esta es la agenda del día de
Well,
hoy.
I
Vamos
wanted
a
to share
platicar
today's
algunas
agenda.
cosas
First, we
de
had
5 minutos,
these
luego
short
aterrizamos
welcoming
directamente
remarks
a
of
la
5 minutes, and
presentación
we
de la
dive
herramienta,
directly
brevemente
into the
parámetros
presentation and
de
introduction of the
desarrollo, y luego
tool, the
veremos
background,
cómo
parameters, development
utilizar
process,
la
and later
herramienta.
we will talk
Después,
about how to use the tool
desde Cali nos van a
itself.
contar los
And then
resultados
we
de
will be
esta prueba de
listening to
herramienta.
the outcomes
Y
of the
después
pilot
vamos a
project
tener
from
una
Cali, Colombia.
sesión de
And
preguntas y
afterwards, we'll
respuestas
have
de
a
10
Q&A
minutos a
session that
cualquiera
will
de los
last 10
ponentes.
minutes. You can
Pedirles
ask
que
any
vayan
of the
anotando
speakers,
sus
and we
preguntas en
will
el
ask
chat
you to
mientras las
please
van
take
escuchando, y nosotros
notes
luego vamos
of
a
your
procesar
questions.
esas
As you
preguntas, y
listen to
también
us, we will
mientras
later
van
process those questions, and we will
participando con las
provide
respuestas,
some
si
time with
ustedes las
open
quieren ir
mic
mandando en el chat,
for
eso
you
va
to
a
ask your questions.
facilitar
Another
mucho
option is for you to
la
write your
tarea
questions on the
de las
task.
preguntas, y
This
eso
will
lo podamos
definitely help us systematize your
hacer todas,
questions
ojalá.
so we can answer,
Vamos a tener un pequeño cierre.
hopefully, we can
Entonces comienzo
answer all of them.
contarles que
And then we'll
gracias al
have
apoyo
a closing.
TUMI
So I'd
y
like to tell you that
Directa,
thanks to
pudimos
support of
desarrollar
Tumi and
esta herramienta con
GIZ,
esfuerzo,
we were
con
able to
colaboración
develop this
con
tool. It's been a
Mujeres,
collaborative work with the movement, Women in Movement,
Despacio en Colombia, y ustedes
ITP
pueden
in
ver aquí
Brazil, and
a las
Space in
personas que
Colombia. And
forman
here
parte
you
del
can
equipo.
see
Hoy nos
the
acompañan
members of our team.
Zaira y
With
Aleja.
us, we have Zaira and Aleja.
Pero
Unfortunately,
pues
Clarice was not
ella
able to join,
formó parte
but
del
this is the
esfuerzo.
team that's been part of this
¿Y cuál
huge
era
effort.
nuestro objetivo, no?
Well, I'll
Nuestro
tell you a
objetivo
little
era
more about
formular un
our
conjunto de
objective. We
indicadores
wanted to
para
formulate a
mejorar
set of indicators to
perspectivamente
incorporate
proyectos de transporte
inclusive
público.
gender
Ya
perspective
Aleja les va a
in
contar
projects
un
of
poquito
public
más adelante
transportation.
cómo fuimos
Later, Aleja will tell us
ajustando
more about
esta
how we
herramienta,
were able
cómo la
to
fuimos
adjust
concibiendo desde un
the
inicio.
tool, how we
Hicimos
conceived
una
it from the
sesión de
beginning,
trabajo en
because
Brasil,
we had
y
a
eso nos
working session
permitió
in Brazil
tener mucha
that
más
allowed us to
información y
collect a lot
retroalimentación
more
por parte de
information and
ciudades de diferentes
feedback
tamaños
from
que nos pedían
cities of
ajustes en
different
la herramienta.
sizes that were
Luego
requesting
se desarrolla esta
adjustments
herramienta
to the
para que las
tool.
ciudades puedan
We've
evaluar
developed the
en
tool
qué
so that
estado
cities can
están en la
assess
implementación de la
the
perspectiva de género.
status of
Zaira
their
también ya les va a explicar
implementation
más
of gender
adelante
perspective.
cómo se usa la
Saida
herramienta,
will later tell us
pero
more on how to use the
esta
tool.
herramienta
But one of the fundamental aspects of the tool is precisely how adaptable it is. Regardless of the stage of implementation of the gender perspective, whether I'm in my city in transportation operation where I work or that I direct, regardless of the stage, the tool can help us assess our situation and help us make progress. And it is key for us to carry out a pilot test that would allow us to make adjustments and corrections. We did this in Cali to make the tool practical, usable. And that's our main interest, that you find value in it. And we don't want it to be stored in a drawer or in a file in your computer. Let me tell you a little bit about the background of the tool. It did not start overnight, but it's actually the result of a process that started with women in movement, together with Espacio, with the support of Evos as well. We had this need for years. We wanted to have indicators to integrate gender perspective in public transportation projects. We know that this has been a very important initiative led in the region. And in this process, we've found several constraints and issues. And this is why we saw the need to have a clear structure with clear indicators with which the cities and transportation operators could have more certainty on how to apply gender perspective. We also need to understand that there are still teams that do not have this technical expertise, and this is something that we are building upon. And we conducted this study. And this study was a starting point. It was a very important effort. We worked also with cities in Mexico, Costa Rica, and Colombia. But this made us hungry for more. And we were thinking, what is the next step? And the next step was precisely to build upon what has been done in different cities. So this study with the support of EVOS and this study with the support of DUMI and GIZ helps us understand the situation in our countries. What are the dynamics that we need to delve into? And from this study, we had very important learnings, a very important leap that has helped us work in a more concrete and practical way. And we've developed a set of indicators to help you, cities and transportation operators, to advance in the integration of gender perspective. The main goal is that our transportation systems and our cities are fair, provide equality, and that we can really tell our users that our transportation systems are covering the needs of the most vulnerable people that women have, and that we are truly ensuring the right to a safe, inclusive, and efficient transportation. With this introduction, I'd like to give the floor to Aleja. Thank you very much, Dani. I take this opportunity to greet you all. I also want to thank Paulina and Andrea, who are also part of our team and who've supported us from Women in Movement, Mujeres en Movimiento. You all know that our transportation systems have been planned and designed, often forgetting the particular needs of women. Different studies have shown different studies have shown that women walk more, women use public transportation and taxi more, and this makes us be more exposed to these public spaces. And territories are not necessarily planned considering this particular needs. Moreover, the implementation of infrastructure lacks some features that women need, such as a light, considering intermodality or change with different types of transportation. And this leads for transportation perception to be different. This also conditions our transportation routines. If it's very late, we decide not to ride our bikes, but take another type of transportation or change the routes if we have any perception of harassment or if we are victims of a violent event in our journey. So this somehow contributes that our security and safety perception and makes our experience less satisfactory than those of men. And regarding the operation, we've talked about planning and design and implementation in terms of infrastructure. And now in regards to operation, some transportation systems do not consider the multiple rights that women take, especially when it has to do with care. And this does not necessarily consider the attention protocols against gender violence, gender-based violence. And this directly impacts the way in which we mobilize and, of course, influences our experience. Considering these issues and different stages in a mobility project, we came to the monitoring part, where we do not necessarily have disaggregated metrics. And this somehow makes the particular needs of women invisible. And this is also a rationale on why it's important to talk about this, to talk about different indicators that are part of the public agenda and within government entities as well. In addition to this, the study that we conducted prior to the formulation of indicators led us to look for information in cities and countries where we live. For those of us part of the project, Dani is from Ecuador, we are from Colombia, ITDP is from Brazil, and of course Mexico with our colleagues from Women in Movement. So we quickly knew the indicators that we needed in Latin America, and we started identifying several challenges in the region. And that they are first, the low technical capacity within organizations regarding gender perspective, and for some decision makers, this is seen as something residual and it's not given the attention it deserves in planning, implementation, and monitoring of systems. Likewise, in this analysis that we conducted, we saw the need to identify the differences in solidity in information systems. There are cities where there is more electric mobility compared to intermediate or medium-sized cities, and we saw a huge difference in this robust nest and solidity of our system. And the same difference in solidity of the system also affects data collection. To develop the tool, we worked on different premises. First, we needed enough information available in the majority of cities for the calculation. We needed indicators that were feasible to implement in small, intermediate, and large cities. And finally, we needed this data to be sufficient. Annie mentioned the first experience we had, the development of these indicators, and the big learning was we wanted to create a concrete list because if we had very extensive indicators, could have become an obstacle to carry out the measurement. And this shows us a very clear target audience. And we know that it's addressed to transportation authorities and private companies that provide public and private companies that provide these services in these cities in Latin America. They're responsible for planning, implementation, operation, and monitoring of these transportation systems. And this is why we try to be very empathetic in the development of the tool so that it could be a useful tool for this target audience. Before giving the floor to Zaida, I wanted to tell you a little bit more about the structure or what we took into account in the tool. Well, the scope of the tool, making it available for collective transportation systems. We focused on metro, tramway, cable, transportation that's considering the stations and also looking in the vehicles. As I showed you before, we have different stages in mobility projects. We start from planning and design, implementation of infrastructure, operation of the system, and monitoring. Operation is really important because based on our survey, we have a peak hour usage of transportation at midday. And in this operation, the frequency of transportation systems have different activities throughout the day. So after defining the different stages of the project, we put on our gender lens to consider different needs of women. We have care mobility that has its own patterns, accessibility and quality of infrastructure, because not women are equal or function in the same way. We want to know if a woman with a stroller can easily access a transportation. It will also be easy for someone with some type of disability. We want to know what is the participation of women and finally understand the regulations and public policies within. We were able to assess this in Brazil in a meeting we held last year in the project Building Feminist Cities, where we brought the advances of the tool and we presented to the experts, considering that this tool was not only built by us, but that it was a collective effort. We counted with the support of experts during this event in Brazil. So now I give the floor to Zaida so you can present us more about the
Muchas
tool.
gracias, Aleja. Muchas
Thank
gracias,
you,
Dani.
Aleja. Thank
Bueno,
you,
ahora sí
Dani.
les vamos a mostrar el resultado final de
Okay,
todo
now
este
we'll be
trabajo.
showing you the
Antes que
final
nada,
outcome of
pues
all this
les
work.
voy a hablar de cómo está construido, digamos que este manual de uso, ¿no? Para
I'll
que
tell you
la
more
persona que
about this
quiera acceder a
user
ella, que quiera
manual
utilizar
for
también
those
esta
who want to
herramienta,
use
tenga
it,
conocimiento de
have
cómo está
access to the tool so
conformado.
you can have information on
Tratamos de
how it's
crear un
built.
manual,
We
¿no?
try to build a
Nos narra un
manual
poco toda esta historia, ¿no? De cuál es la problemática y
that would
la
tell us the
solución, todos estos
story of what
antecedentes
is
que
the
Dani nos
rationale,
comentaba,
all
el
this
por qué es
background
necesaria
information that
tener
Danny
una
told
herramienta de
us about,
evaluación,
and why it is so
algunos
important to have an
antecedentes también y
assessment
todo
tool. What
este
are the
excedente.
objectives of the
Después
tool?
viene el recapítulo, sí, esta parte de
And then
recapitular
we have
todos
this
los
part where
resultados que
we
tuvimos en la
recap
revisión
all
en
our
estos
outcomes
países que
of the
tenemos.
review in these
Tenemos
countries.
una región muy
We
grande y
understand that
enfrentamos
although we are a
también los
large
mismos retos, ¿no? Aunque hay
region, we know
países, hay
we
ciudades
face the
en
same
donde
challenges.
tenemos
Although there are
parcialmente
cities
avance
where
en
we
la
have
inclusión de la
slight
perspectiva de género
advances in gender
en la prestación del
perspective
servicio de transporte,
inclusion
también
in the
identificamos que en esta
provision of
región
transportation
tenemos
system, we also
muchos en
acknowledge
común.
that we have
El
many
objetivo que tratamos
challenges
de
in
hacer es
common.
una herramienta pareja para
So
todos,
our
¿no?
objective was
Tratar de
to
alinear
build a
estos
tool
puntos que nos
useful
comentaba, como
for
decía
all,
Dani, no importar si estás en cero, si no sabes ni cómo
regardless if we are
o si ya
at
eres
an
un centro de
initiation
transporte
stage
con una
or we
secretaría ya
already
muy
have
avanzada
a
o si
department that
todavía
has made
vienes en un
important
nivel medio.
progress.
¿Qué es
This
lo que
tool
queremos con
allows
esta
us
herramienta?
to
Uno es
assess.
tener todos los
Our
conceptos
objectives with the
básicos,
tool is
¿no? Es
first
una
to have
herramienta que
all
te
the
permite
basic
conocer
concept.
qué es lo que
It
nosotros
allows us
conocemos como
to
sistema de transporte, sistema
know
de
what we
transporte masivo,
understand
perspectiva
by
de género,
massive
todos estos
transportation
conceptos en
system,
algo
gender
más
perspective, and all
técnico
these
también, ¿no?
more
Entendiendo
technical
los sistemas de
concepts
transporte.
in all our
Tenemos
transportation
también una
systems.
bibliografía que nosotros
We
sugerimos
have
consultar y básicamente lo que
bibliography
hacemos
that
es
we
dar
propose to be
clavamanales
checked. And what
de
we
lo que
try to do
empezamos a
is
trabajar con
share
esta herramienta desde
tips on
cero.
how to
Si
work
quieres,
with
Dani, la
this tool
siguiente.
from scratch. Next, please.
Muchas gracias. Y bueno, les compartimos aquí, ya está en la página de internet esta herramienta.
Oh, and here in our
En inglés y
website,
también en
we
español. Si quieren
have
pueden escanear
the tool and
QR,
it's
nos
in
vamos a
different
compartir en
languages.
las
You can
redes sociales
scan the QR
para que
codes. We'll
puedan
also
acceder
work
a
on a
todas estas
dissemination campaign so
herramientas
you
y
get to know
acceder
it better,
fácilmente a
so
ellas.
you can access it
Si me puedes ayudar a
easily.
compartir, Dani.
If you allow me to share, Nani, please.
Listo, muchas gracias.
Perfect.
Esta es la página de internet, ¿no? Como
This
les
is our
mencionaba,
website.
está en inglés y en español. Lo
As I
vamos a
mentioned,
dejar
it's written
aquí
both in English
rápidamente.
and Spanish.
El
And
botón
very
donde pueden
briefly, here
descargar
you'll
propiamente
find
la herramienta.
where to download
Tenemos
the
aquí
tool
un
itself.
banner que nosotros
We also have a
diseñamos en
banner
donde
that we designed
sintetizamos toda esta
where we
problemática, qué es lo que busca la
summarize
herramienta,
the
qué es lo que
issues,
nos
what the
espera, cuál es su
tool
alcance y sobre todo un
addresses,
poco los
what the
resultados
scope
después de la
is,
prueba
and
piloto en
also
Cali, que les vamos a comparar
some
un
of the
poco más adelante.
results
Lina
of
nos va a
the
dar esta experiencia.
pilot
Pueden
in Cali,
descargar
Colombia.
tanto
Lina
la
will tell
herramienta
us
tanto
more.
en inglés como
You
en
can
español.
also download
Aquí
the
van a
poster
descargar
both in
el
English
manual
and
de uso.
Spanish,
Y
and
ahora
here you
sí
can
me voy
download the
directamente
user's
a la
manual.
herramienta.
And now I go directly into the tool.
Podemos ver cómo hay una pestaña. Lo que hicimos fue pensar en una herramienta que fuera de fácil acceso para
We
todos y
wanted
que
the
fuera
tool
muy
to be
entendible.
easy to
Lo que hicimos
access
fue
and
tratar de crear
user-friendly.
un Excel, ¿no? Tratar de hacer este listado de control para
We
que
made this
podamos
control list in
estudiarla
an Excel
fácilmente y que sea
sheet
como muy
to make it
intuitiva,
easy,
digamos.
simple, and
Tenemos una página con
intuitive.
las instrucciones,
We have a
¿sí? Muy
website with all
paso a
the
paso.
instructions, a
Cuáles son
clear
estas
step by
dimensiones,
step on what are
cómo
the
vamos
different
a qué
dimensions,
información
how
debo de
we're
tener
going
a
to
la mano,
work on it,
muy
what is the
importante, ¿no?
information I need
Van
to
a
have
ver que
handy. This
esto
is
no
very
es información
important.
que
You
sea
will
de
see
todas las
that it's
áreas, sino que
not
tiene que ver
information
con todas las
corresponding to a
áreas, tanto
single
institucional,
area.
docente, de la
It
empresa
covers
proveedora al
both
servicio.
institutional
Y una
information as
descripción
well as the
como
service
nos
provider.
comentaban, esta
And as my
herramienta está
colleagues
pensada
told
tanto
us,
para
this
las
tool
empresas
has
prestadoras del
been
servicio de
thought
transporte
for
como para las
service
autoridades encargadas de
providers
la
and also
operación
for
de movilidad en la
authorities in
ciudad.
charge of
Por ello, lo que
mobility
tenemos
in the
son
cities.
dos pestañas por
Therefore,
separado en donde
we
cada
have
una podrá llenar este
two tabs where you can fill your control list and you can have your own independent outcomes. Yeah, we also have a short glossary. These are some of the concepts that are part of the manual and the guidelines for the use of the tool. And this is, in general terms, the different dimensions, the stages, the tool covers from planning, implementation, operation, and monitoring. And we generally define what we understand by each one of these stages. And then we present the different gender categories seen in the tool, like journey experience, access to infrastructure, work participation in transportation sector, because for us, it is very important to look into this, not only in service provision, but also how in the management, the company, and the directorate, how this gender perspective is mainstreamed. We also look into journey patterns in the city and regulations and public policies in the cities. When we go into the different tabs, depending if you're a service provider or authority, what we see is that this is thought in the different dimensions that we presented before in a simple way where answers are preloaded. Each response has an assigned mark, and this allows us to go into our website where we can see the results of our assessment. In this assessment page, once we have the results, we see these are the 4 possible outcomes. We call them a level of maturity regarding the inclusion of gender perspective in public transportation provision or management. So the first option is we do not see any progress up until the advanced level. Each of these levels has a very general description to help us interpret the result of our tool. And finally, as my colleagues mentioned, this tool has been thought for the building of indicators. But after all this joint work, after we came back from our workshop in Brazil and we started tackling the different challenges that Latin American cities faced, we concluded that it was not easy or viable to have a tool that calculated the indicators because we realized that not all cities are at the same level. So what we did is we collected all our indicators and we created an additional list of indicators. Here we provide possibilities on how these indicators could be calculated, what could be the potential sources of information, what are the measurement units, what could be the perspective of the indicator. With this additional information, we want to create an input so that cities that want to make progress on key aspects can use this guide, can use these indicators, and know where to start. It's important to mention that this assessment tool is not only useful once. The idea is that it's part of our ongoing work in your administration. And if you develop punctual activities, once we identify these areas opportunity, we can go back and fill this list again and understand what is the level you're in and gender perspective
bueno,
integration.
esta es la herramienta. Nos encantaría que muchas ciudades en América
So this is the
Latina
tool.
pudieran comenzar a
We would
implementarla,
really
pudieran
love
comenzar a
many
utilizarla.
Latin American
Y me
cities to start
gustaría
implementing it and
compartir
using it.
el micrófono a Lina. Ella nos acompaña
Now,
desde
I'd like to
nuestro
give the
prueba
floor
piloto,
to
donde
Lina.
hicimos esta prueba piloto. Nosotros
Lina is from
trabajamos
Cali,
esta
where we did the
herramienta y
pilot
tanto para
test.
las instituciones prestadoras como para las
As you know, this
de
tool
servicio.
is
Hicimos
made
una prueba
for service
piloto
provision
en
and
Cali y en la
administrators.
Secretaría de Movilidad
So we did this pilot
de
in
Cali.
Cali.
Entonces, le voy a dejar el micrófono a Lina para que
I'll
pueda
give the floor to Lina now,
experiencia.
so she can share her experience
Hola,
with
buenos
us.
días a todos. Pues aquí desde Cali les contamos
Hello,
nuestra
everyone.
experiencia cuando hicimos este prueba piloto con
I'll
los
tell you more about our
indicadores
experience during the
y la
pilot test with the
herramienta que nos tocó
indicators.
a nosotros para implementarla en el sistema.
We
Y pues
received
lo
the
más
tool to implement it in the
importante
system,
lo primordial que nosotros
and
encontramos es
our main
que
takeaways are
es
that
fundamental que exista una directriz
it
de
is
autoridades
fundamental to have
de la ciudad y
guidelines
de la
coming
oficina.
from high authorities of the
Ya
city and
existían
the
para ese momento
service
desde
provision
alcaldía una
company.
intención
At the
de que
time,
estos
the
temas de género estuvieran
municipality
presentes
already
dentro de
had the
la
initiative
cadena
to
de transporte.
implement
Con
this
esta
gender
medida
perspective in
había
the
empezado
transportation
desde hace
system.
mucho a generarse un equipo de trabajo para poder trabajar sobre estos temas.
So we already
Así
had
que
a
cuando nos
work
llegó
team
la herramienta nos
to address
encontramos
these
con un montón de
topics.
información que tuvimos que
When we
empezar
received
a
the
recoger
tool, we
por cada
collected
entidad.
information in all
Una decían hay una parte
entities.
de planeación, otra de operación, de infraestructura, es decir, la información estaba bastante atomizada dentro de la entidad.
It was not easy because all information was scattered in
Digamos
the
que
entities.
Perdóname, Lina, que te interrumpa,
dime,
pero hay un ruido, creo que tal vez puede ser tu micrófono. No
no
sé
sé.
Sorry to
si
interrupt,
tenemos
Lina, but
alguna
there is
interrupción
noise. I think it's your microphone.
podemos escuchar tan bien.
It's hard to hear you.
Pues también es que estoy acá cerca a unas oficinas y es posible que tenga un ruidito atrás. Pero no sé si me
Ahí
acerco
está
un poco
mejor.
más.
Dale.
Ok, voy a mantener así el
Yes, it is.
micrófono.
Note from the interpreter, it's also very
Bueno,
difficult to
entonces, como
hear
les
and
decía,
interpret. Sorry about that.
desde planeación e infraestructura, por ejemplo, encontramos que el sistema contaba con varias de los indicadores en
So we
positivo.
saw that the system had many indicators.
Concebido el sistema en cuanto a temas de accesibilidad, por ejemplo,
And regards
pero
to
no
accessibility,
porque
for
fueran unos
instance.
lentes de género, sino porque venía así concebido el sistema.
And this was how
Y
the system had
avanzando
been
en
conceived,
la
not
investigación
because it had necessarily a
empezamos a
gender
dar cuenta de que
perspective.
algunos indicadores encontramos que para muchos era como que no entendían que tenía que ver, por ejemplo, la iluminación con temas de género.
Many did not understand
Entonces
what did
pensaban
light
como
have
que
to
el
do
canal
with the
para
gender
poder
issues.
la iluminación tiene que ver con la seguridad,
And we
con la
explained
sensación
that good
de estar
light is
cómodo, buen
related
espacio
to
para esperar,
safety,
por ejemplo,
security, for someone to feel
y
comfortable
esto es
when
muy importante
waiting
para los
for
temas de
the
género
bus at the bus
incluso para las
station,
mujeres y
etc., and
niñas
how
dentro del
this
campo del transporte.
translated
Estos eran como
into
puntos importantes que encontramos
safety and
dentro de
security for women. So these
la
are important
implementación de la
points that we
herramienta.
identified in the implementation of the tool.
Nosotros como veníamos ya con esta administración desde la alcaldía y la presidencia, empezando a trabajar estos temas de género, pues
We
vimos
had
que
already started working on gender
ya había
issues.
empezado a desarrollarse temas con los concesionarios, con los conductores, se habían empezado a hacer capacitaciones. Ok, es que se me cruzó la traducción. Pero vimos como que teníamos como incipientes nuestros avances en los protocolos dirigidos a nuestros usuarios, a nuestras usuarias. Y
also
esto nos
worked with
mostró
protocols
como
for our
caminos que
users.
teníamos que continuar para poder darle avance a nuestros temas sobre género en el sistema. Ya
And we
esto
knew
nos
how
ayudó
important it was
a
to work on
mostrarnos
gender
por dónde
issues in the
teníamos que ir,
system.
ver que teníamos que empezar a tener evaluación, que nos faltaban tal vez temas,
And
por
we
ejemplo, como
knew
son
that we were lacking
diagnósticos,
assessment,
y hemos ido
diagnosis,
trabajando en eso, lo que fue resultando en un protocolo que
and we
estamos
built a
lanzando
protocol
desde la semana pasada a esta
that we
semana.
launched
Estamos en el
last week.
protocolo Lila, que para nosotros pues es como un gran
This is called
punto
the
que
Purple
estamos
Protocol.
trabajando ahora, donde tenemos unos espacios dentro de los buses articulados con unas sillas brandeadas
And
para
we
las
have
mujeres
special
en color
spaces on
lila con un
buses that are
código
branded
a
with
partir del cual pueden
branded in
ustedes
purple.
indicar si tienen algún caso de violencia de género.
And we invite
Y
women
también
to
a partir de ver
send
que dentro
complaints
de
in
las
case they
acciones que uno
faced
indicaba,
any
los indicadores eran los
violence,
espacios para las
incidents, or
mujeres,
harassment in
protocolos
public
dirigidos
transportation.
obviamente a los
We also
trabajadores
informed
del
about
sistema
protocols
y
addressed to
a las
users of the
mujeres.
system.
Así que pues fue muy interesante ver que
So it
a
was
pesar de que nosotros
very
sí teníamos
insightful
muchas
to
cosas
see
a
that
partir de la concepción del sistema como tal, que viene muy parecido al
although
sistema de
we
Bogotá, al sistema
did
de
have
Medellín, es
information,
otra cosa ponerle los lentes
our
de
system
género
was very
y
similar
empezar a
to the
trabajar
system
estos
in
temas
Bogota and Medellin.
con,
Things are different
con
when
hombres,
we
pues
see them
es
from the
un
gender
entorno muy
perspective.
masculino, que es el que tenemos dentro de estos sistemas, y que ellos también empiecen a ver que desde la planeación de
So
dónde
it's
ponemos un
important
paradero,
to
de cómo armo
know,
un paradero, de
to
todas estas
understand
cosas que tenemos que ir
how
capacitando, no
important it is
solamente a los
to
conductores y a los
include
que están en
gender
el campo, sino
perspective
nosotros mismos dentro
from
de nuestra
planning stages,
estructura
and
organizacional, y es
how,
algo
as
en lo
part
que
of our
estamos trabajando
organizational structure, we
fuertemente.
can
Nos ayuda pues
integrate
a tener un sistema mucho
this
más amigable
gender lens,
para las mujeres, y cuando es
to
amigable para las
have
mujeres,
a
pues es
system that is
para
friendlier
todos.
for women. And
Creo que
if it's
fue
friendlier for
de lo que
women, it's
más
friendlier for
aprendimos
all. So this
durante
is
la implementación de la herramienta.
what we learned during the implementation of the tool.
Ahí ya, Daniela, te doy la palabra.
Muchísimas gracias, Lina. Muy interesante la experiencia
Thank you, Lina.
del pilotaje en Cali.
It's been very interesting to hear about the pilot in Cali.
Con ustedes. Vamos a... Ay, perdónenme. Acá estoy, perdón, ya. Vamos a pasar a la parte de las preguntas. Entonces,
We will
nada más,
now go on to our Q&A
si quieren hacer una
session. I
pregunta,
just wanted to
utilicen
give
los
you a few
micrófonos o
instructions.
tengan
If
el
you want to
micrófono
use the
encima
microphone,
para
please
darles la
raise your
palabra
hand
y
so we can give you
pueden
the
hacer
floor.
también la pregunta en el chat.
You can also
Por
ask your
favor, si
questions
quieren
on the
hacer la pregunta a
chat.
alguien específico,
Please, if you want to
mencionen su nombre
address your question to someone
y
specific,
tratemos de ser lo más
mention that
brevemente
person's name,
concretas
and let's
para
try to
poder
be as
escuchar
brief
y
and
recibir la
as
mayor cantidad de
concrete as
preguntas
possible
posible.
so we can
Recuerden que pueden hacer
address
sus preguntas a Aleja, Zaira o a
most
la
questions
Keisha
possible. You
o
can
a mí
address your
directamente.
question to any of us.
Voy a dejar de compartir y voy a pasar a las preguntas. Había una pregunta sobre qué es la
I
movilidad del
know there's a
cuidado. Vamos a ver
question
si
that asks, what is mobility of care? Aleja, maybe you can help
Ahí
us
también
with
les he ido
that.
respondiendo un poco también a Vanessa, que nos había
Yes, of
preguntado. La
course.
movilidad del cuidado es un término
Mobility of
asignado
care
inicialmente por
is a
Inés
term that's
Sánchez de María Inés,
been
pastora del Caribe
coined
2019,
by Maria
que empezó
Inés.
a
She's a Spanish
identificar que las
woman.
mujeres teníamos
In
unos patrones muy
2019,
diferentes
she
a las
identified that women
hombres.
have patterns that are very
Precisamente
different
en
from
muchos
men.
casos esos patrones asociados a las labores del cuidado. Entonces, la
Oftentimes, these
movilidad del
patterns
cuidado
are
se refiere a
related
todos
to
esos
care
viajes que se
activities.
realizan
And
para
these have to do with
acompañar a las
journeys
personas
that are
a las
carried out to
residencias, a
accompany
todas
family
estas,
members
llevar
to
niños y niñas al colegio o a actividades
different activities,
extracurriculares. Es
taking
decir,
children
todos
to
aquellos
school, to
desafíos que se requieren
any
en función del cuidado.
extracurricular activity. all activities related to care. These are usually carried out by women. So this term makes the differences in
Gracias, Daniela.
patterns visible,
En relación a las
differences
preguntas de
between men and
Vanessa
women.
sobre los temas de
Regarding
género,
Vanessa's
tal
question
vez, Zaira,
regarding
si tú me puedes
electric
comentar la
mobility,
aplicabilidad de
maybe
la
Isaida can
herramienta
tell
a
us more about the
diferentes
application of the
sistemas de
tool
transporte, sean
for
estos
different
eléctricos, sean
transportation systems
operados
that
con
could be
sistemas
electric
tradicionales y
or
agregarte una
more
pregunta adicional
traditionally
que me están
operated.
preguntando si es que
We have
la
another
herramienta está
question.
enfocada en sistemas de
We're being
transporte
asked that given
si
that
es
the
que
tool is
puede
focused on
aplicarse
massive
para ciudades
transportation
medianas,
system,
es decir,
could it
para
also
ciudades
be
donde apenas están
applied
formando
to
el sistema
medium-sized cities?
de transporte público metropolitano. Esta es una pregunta de Valeria.
This is a question coming from
Gracias.
Valeria.
Pues primero que nada,
Thank you.
la tecnología que sea utilizada en la prestación del
Well,
servicio
first,
no
the
está,
technology
digamos
used in the
metida
provision
en
of the
la norma.
service is not
La
embedded
condición
in
sería que
this
la prestación del servicio ya estuviera
analysis. The
conformada a
condition would be
través
that
de
the service
esta
provision
empresa,
would be
no del sistema tradicional
carried
como
out by a
nosotros le
company,
conocemos. Sin
not
embargo,
by
lo que sí
the
se puede hacer,
traditional
con esto
transportation
respondo
means.
la otra pregunta, es aunque
What
en
we
una
can
ciudad
do
aún no
is
exista un
that
servicio
even
que sea
though
prestado a través de una
if in a city
empresa,
there's not yet a service
a
provided by
través de
a
una
company, could
formalización del
be
servicio,
through
sí
the
se puede
formalization
aplicar
of a service,
obviamente a la
we
institución que esté
this can be
gestionando el
applied to the
servicio en la
institution
ciudad.
that is
Sí,
managing the service in
hay
the
ciudades
cities.
que todavía todo su servicio es prestado a través de este esquema hombre
We
camión.
know
Sin embargo,
that
se puede
in
comenzar con
many cities,
evaluación a través de la institución, el
transportation
instituto, la
services are
empresa que
provided
esté
by
gestionando,
buses,
la
but we can
institución, ¿no?,
work
pública
with
que esté encargada
public
de la gestión.
institutions that are
Lo
in
que se
charge of
puede hacer,
management.
para lo que puede ser útil, es justamente en estas ciudades en donde
It can be
apenas está
useful for
comenzando a
cities where they're
formalizar la
just
prestación del
starting to
servicio,
formalize
utilizar esta herramienta
service
como una
provision. We
guía.
can
Ya que
use this
nosotros
tool as
tenemos
a
esta
guide.
etapa desde la planeación, que en muchas de las
As
ciudades
we've
ya
told
están
you,
evaluadas y
we
que tienen
apply the tool from planning
digamos, una
stages.
historia mucho más
For
grande, ¿no?,
cities that have
desde que se
longer
implementaron estos
history,
servicios de
where
transporte
these
ya
transportation system
estructurados o
have been
formalizados, pues a lo
implemented
mejor
and
es un poco
formalized.
complicado hacer estas mejoras cuando ya, por ejemplo, la
Sometimes it's
infraestructura se
difficult to think
construyó hace
about
30, 40
improvements when
años, ¿no?
infrastructure has been
Sin
built
embargo, en las ciudades
30,
en
40
donde
years ago.
apenas se va a empezar a formalizar, la
However, in
herramienta
cities
podría
where
servir justo como
transportation
una guía de cuáles
just
son
start
estos
to be
criterios que se
formalized,
deben de
the tool
considerar
can be
desde una
used
etapa
to
temprana
help us
de la
understand the
formalización
criteria to be
del servicio de
implemented in
transporte.
early stages of the formalization
Y tal
of
vez ahí
transportation
agregar dos
systems.
cosas. La una es,
I'd
esta
like to
herramienta
add a
sirve
couple of
muchísimo para
things.
tener una lista
First,
base,
that this
es
tool is
decir, de
very useful
dónde
to
está
establish
partiendo
a
independientemente del
baseline
sistema que
to
tenemos
understand where
implementado
I'm
en la
departing
ciudad.
from, regardless of the transportation system that is
Identificar
implemented in the
cuáles son
city,
las brechas,
to help us
cuáles son las
identify
acciones
the
que se pueden
gaps
tomar
and the
para ir
actions that
avanzando en cualquiera de
can be
las cuatro
taken to make
fases
progress in either
que puede ser la
of the
planeación,
four
la
stages for
implementación,
planning,
la
for
operación y la
implementation, for
manutención.
operation,
Entonces, digamos
and
que
for
ya con este
monitoring.
sistema armado que
So
ya está
if I have a
perfecto, puedo
system that
empezar a
is
evaluar
built, that is
operación.
functioning, maybe I
¿Cómo
want
está mi
to
operación? Por
assess
ejemplo,
operation. How am I doing on
ya
this?
estoy en un proceso de planificación de un nuevo sistema
But maybe I'm
de
planning
las unidades de
the
transporte.
implementation of a new system
Entonces,
that
esta
could be
herramienta me
electric
capacita
units.
para
So I can
planificar mi
easily
nuevo
use
sistema
the
de
tool to
transporte
plan
y
this new
hacer cosas.
system in spite
Porque
of
la
me
herramienta
operating
está
a
hecha
different one.
entendiendo
Because the
tanto que
tool
hay
has
sistemas que ya
been
están
built
operando y
understanding
luego
that there are
deben
systems that are already
esa operación
operating
tener algunos ajustes
and
y
that
previos
that
y
operation
después
itself
empezando
needs to
la
have adjustments,
planificación.
that there are
Y en el
other
caso de
systems that are
Cali, el
just being
pilotaje se
planned.
hizo
In the
tanto
case
con
of
la
Cali, the
operadora del
pilot
sistema
was
de
conducted
transporte
both
como
with the
con la
transportation operator
dirección
as well
para
as
la
with the
movilidad
directorate
sostenible
in
y
the
segura del transporte
municipality
público
in
en
charge
materia de
of
movilidad.
public
Entonces,
policy in
también
terms of
la
mobility.
herramienta sirve para que a ese
So the
nivel
tool is
institucional
also
y a nivel
useful. So at that
empresarial,
institutional
personas a
level,
las que establecen las políticas
entities
públicas
that
desde el
define
municipio, desde
public
el gobierno,
policies that must be
puedan
implemented
también
by the
hacer una evaluación
operators,
de cómo
so that we can also assess how the entity is integrating gender perspectives and sending public policy guidelines onto the implementers. Alejandra, would you like to add anything?
Y precisamente tu intervención, creo que hay algo muy interesante que
Yes.
pudimos ver en Cali, que era nuestra
Something
impresión, que lo pudimos
very
ver en Cali,
interesting that we
fue
saw in
que
Cali
el solo llevar la iniciativa
was
y
that the
articular
only
a todas
fact
las
of taking the
organizaciones
initiative and being
que
able to
estaban
articulate
afectadas
all
por
the
la
entities where
desinformación, lo
this
que esto produjo
disinformation
fue que
lied,
se empezara a hablar del tema en una entidad que no necesariamente estaba tan
this
vinculada dentro
sparked
del enfoque de género.
the
Y creo que
discussion of
esto
the
tiene que
gender
llegar sobre
perspective
todo para aquellas
inclusion.
ciudades
And this is
donde
very
apenas
valuable,
está empezando
namely for
a
cities
ver el
where
tema.
they're just
Entonces,
starting to talk about this
digamos
important
que
topic.
esa poner la discusión en la agenda pública
So I would
trae
say
muchas
that the
repercusiones
simple
desde el
fact of
público,
putting the topic
desde la
on
toma de decisiones,
people's
que
agendas
se
is
da
already
que
very
muchos
important
legisladores
and influences decision
lo
making.
pudimos ver
And I think this is one
aquí
of
también.
our main accomplishments that was visible in Cali.
Tenemos una pregunta para Lina.
And we have a question for Lina. Lina, how did
Bueno,
men
pues inicialmente,
receive the
digamos como que
tool
muchos
in the
decían
pilot
que tenían
test?
que ver con el tema,
Well,
pero
initially, some of
cuando
them
nos
did not
hablaban
understand
ya
how
de
they were
las
involved in it.
inequalidades respecto, por ejemplo, como poniéndoles ejemplos sobre las
But
mujeres
then,
que
when we
vivían o
shared
alrededor, ya
examples
como
and
que
helped
desistieron un
them
poco.
note
Por
the
ejemplo,
women that were
con el
near them,
área
they
de
started
planeación o
being
toma
more
de
aware of it.
diseños de ciertas estaciones, les decía
The
a
area
ellos
of
que
design of some
pensar, por ejemplo,
stations,
en que
we
su
asked
hija no
men
podía
to
llevarla
think, for
sola
instance,
en un
imagine your
paradero y
daughter
necesita un espacio donde ella
in
esté
a bus
segura,
station by
donde
herself.
duerma
She
o ese tipo de
needs
cosas,
to
para
feel
que tú
safe.
no estés
There needs to
preocupado de
be
ella
good
estar en la
light,
calle sola
so you're
buscando
not
un bus, esperando un
concerned or
bus y
worried
que
that
es
your
peligroso o no.
young daughter is waiting for the bus
Sensibilizarlos
by
como principal
herself,
para que
thinking that she
entendieran
might be
cosas
in a
de
dangerous
pronto que
environment.
a
So,
veces
with these
no tienen en el
examples, we
radar.
helped men
Entonces,
understand
yo
these
les decía,
things
por
that are
ejemplo,
sometimes not
cuando yo
visible to
tomo
them.
un bus en alguna parte o voy a tomar un
We
transporte,
explained
a
to
veces le
them
tengo que mandar mi ubicación
when I
a mi
take
esposo para
public
que
transportation,
él
sometimes I need to send my location to my
entonces
husband.
yo decía, pero yo creo que
So
tú nunca jamás
I
me
feel
estás
calm and
mandando tu
he
ubicación
feels calm.
en tiempo
And we
real,
ask them, do you
cosa
ever send
para
your
que no se
real
sienta
time
invisible. Entonces ellos decían,
location to
¿cómo así?
your wife
Entonces son
for you to
cosas
feel
que
safer? And they
a veces
responded,
muchas
not
mujeres
really.
no
So these are
entienden y
things
nosotros
that
sí lo
men
manejamos
sometimes
por
do
ejemplo
not
en otras
understand because
dinámicas
we
de,
have
a ver,
different
nosotros podemos alargar un
dynamics,
poco más o hacer un poco más largos nuestras traslados con tal de sentirnos más seguras.
because women
Preferible
sometimes
ir a
take
una
the
estación
longer
que esté en un
routes
paradero.
and walk
Son
more just to feel
filosofías
safer.
que empezamos a trabajar y ya
So
como
these
que
are the
se
ideas that we
hizo más
started
fácil el
working
movimiento y
on,
lo han entendido. Además que, como
and
te digo,
they
desde
were
la concientización
sensitized
y la
and
visibilidad se está trabajando en
they
el tema y
felt
todo
these
estando
experiences as
articulado
their own.
con
And
estas
these were
organizaciones
initiatives that help us
organizaciones
articulate
para
with
todo el sistema.
these initiatives in Metro Cali that would hopefully help the whole system in the future.
Muchas
Thank you.
gracias. Tengo varias preguntas sobre si
Oh,
quiero
there are
implementarla,
several
la
questions about
herramienta aquí
what to do
en
if
la
I want
ciudad
to
o
implement the
que
tool,
quisiéramos
who
hacer
to
una
contact,
presentación
or if we
sobre cómo
could
estamos
make a
implementando
presentation
en México. La
in
verdad, sí.
Michoacán. It would be a
Sabemos
great
que
pleasure, of course.
mucho de esto a veces requiere
We know
justamente
very well that
impulso
this
que viene
often
desde
needs
fuera,
this
que a veces el
momentum,
impulso se
this
puede
push
sentir
that
muy
comes
desigual,
from
¿verdad? Que
outside,
además
or
tiene
having this
la
regional
apoyo de TUMI,
perspective that also
la
accounts for the
cooperación
support of
alemana
TUMI
y
and
con
the
el
German
entusiasmo de los
cooperation
temas
with the technical rigorosity with
Entonces,
which it has
estamos
been
dejando
done.
nuestros contactos
So, of
en
course,
el chat
we are
para que
writing
se
our
puedan
contact information on the
escribir
chat
cualquiera de
so you can
nosotras.
write
No
to
se
us,
preocupen, puede
to
ser a
any of
Saida, puede ser
us.
Aleja, puede
You
ser a
can write
mí,
Saida,
o
Aleja,
podemos
me.
internamente
we make the internal coordinations necessary, and we will gladly support you in any process you wish, either to make these presentations, to promote political will and understanding of the needs, and then if you wish accompaniment for the implementation of the tool, we can also reach an agreement on the term of the implementation, but it would be a great pleasure to accompany these implementation because this provides us with more and more information that helps us disseminate the results and also generate higher political will for massive implementation. Same thing with students. I see a master's degree student question, of course. Can use the information for us to update our information on our website. And this is all very valuable to continue promoting knowledge and the application. That is what interests us the most. I see a question coming from Irene. She asks, have you thought about the routes? Will you be conducting a periodic monitoring of the systems, or will you put together the results in different cities?
Ya, pues si quieres, les respondo un poco de cuál era la idea original, era justamente
Sure.
hacer,
The
digamos,
initial
una
idea
plataforma
was to
para todos.
create a platform accessible to all. However, we know that having this platform open could not necessarily motivate some instances. Maybe they would feel exposed, and this is not our aim. We want this tool to be used to conduct the assessment, but as Dani has said, it would be very useful for us to have this follow-up, to know who has implemented it. Maybe questions will arise on how to use it, and maybe we could provide feedback about it. But for us, it is key to identify and track who is implementing the tool and do the necessary follow-up to know what the outcomes are. So it's not internally designed to do this follow-up, but we are fully open to this possibility so we can help implementation in the cities. And before I give the floor to Keisha, we have the Global Feminist Alliance platform where we have Women of Movement. It's one of the founding networks. And in this platform, we will host the tool both in Spanish and English. And it is through the GIZ offices in the region that we've made a presentation of the tool to the different people responsible of German cooperation in the region, with the aim that the tool can be disseminated. But I'll give the floor to Keisha so she can tell us more about the role of the Global Feminist Alliance and how we can continue promoting the dissemination of the tool, potential monitoring, some next steps. And please, Keisha, also tell us if the recording of the session will be available.
Yes. Hello. Now I'm speaking in English. Thank you to, so if you haven't switched to Spanish, you should switch to Spanish. Thank you so much, Dani, Alejandra, Zaira, and Lina for the presentations. It was very inspiring to see also the example of Kali and to see that these tools are getting even more nitty-gritty. I mean, it's not new that there are gender tools available, but it's great that there's one that's already been piloted right after creating this tool. It's been amazing to see. So as mentioned earlier by Dani, this is available in English and Spanish on the Global Alliance for Feminist Transport website. Consuelo has put it on the chat already. And yes, if you want to know more, you have the emails of Danny, Alejandra, Saira. But if you also want to share the results in a report, you can feel free to share whatever results you have in the Global Alliance website if you're open to do that. Otherwise, good food for thought for us to think about how others can also share in their experience in using the tool for this. And the recording of this will be available at the Tumi YouTube channel. So we will announce that on the Women Mobilize Women LinkedIn page later on. But again, thank you to everybody who has been interested in this. And I'm very happy to see that people are really excited to use the tool. So that's great for us to know. And yeah, thank you again. Good morning to everybody on that side of the world. And thank you again to everybody for attending this. So maybe back to Danny to close.
Muchas gracias, Keisha. Muchas gracias a todas que se han
Thank you,
conectado.
Keisha, and thank you all who have joined today. Remember, download the tool in the Global Feminist Alliance website. Follow us on LinkedIn for next steps, both in Tumi website and Mujeres and Movimiento website. You have our email, our contacts. You can write to us if you have any questions. Thank you again for joining us. Thank you, Aleja, Zaira, Lina, Keisha, and thank you all who've worked on this project. It's a great pleasure to see you and have a great day. Thank you all. Have a good day.
Gracias, que estén muy bien.
Bye bye.